Right. Um, Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight we're going to be having a live stream discussion on Around the World in 80 Days. This is the 1956 film starring David Niven, as opposed to the uh, other one, which I think was around 2004 with Jackie Chan and Steve Coogan. So it's a very unique film in a number of ways, which Malcolm and I will be discussing during the course of this live stream. And it's also a film that I think is pretty much highly memorable for a number of reasons. And it's certainly one of the cinematic greats is the wrong way of putting it, but it's one of the most memorable films in cinematic history, and it shouldn't be ignored. And I think it's one of those films everyone should see at least once in their lives, simply because it's of the history of the film, the story, and the actors involved. It was the only film that Mike Todd, the producer, ever produced, and he was pretty much a showman in a number of ways, and that comes across very much in this film. It is almost like a film at a circus in that regard, but it's also a good travelogue. I mean, if you look at the fact it was made in the 1950s, when people didn't travel abroad so extensively as they do now. It was pretty much also a travelogue film in its own kind of way, because obviously you get to see the world, parts of the world, albeit from soundstage studios, that you otherwise wouldn't have. But it's pretty much worth looking at. I've started a few minutes early. I think I've been caught on the wrong foot sometimes because of last minute hiccups. So far, there haven't been any. But in the process of me taking into account potential hiccups, I'm running a bit ahead of myself, shall we say. So do bear with me, because now I'm going to have to constantly talk until Malcolm turns up. And but again, you are free to contribute. It's not just Malcolm and myself. We do have some for those of you watching on my blog at paulbergen.blogspot.com. You can leave comments under the blog page where this has been shown. If you're watching via my YouTube page, obviously there's a live discussion bit next to it, and do feel free to leave any comments if you wish, and or will be taken into account in the conversation. So please do join us. Please do join us. I'm doing at the moment some spot of light housekeeping, which is just essentially making sure everything technical is accounted for. So yes, do take feel free to take part, and do feel free to tell anyone else who might be interested in this film that this is going on right now. And yes, I hope you're all having a good day. The weather was somewhat strange today in the UK. Yes, it's. I'm just writing an ad for this on my Twitter page. Join us at Mars Hill blog. Mars Hill blog at 8 p.m. GMT, where second, Achilles and I. World in 80 days. So, yeah, it's all starting to kick off. And of course, I mean, the film, it's been really redone. There was a remake in 2004, which was not good. I don't think it was good anyway. There was a TV version with David Tennant recently, but they very cleverly altered considerable bits of the plot, which I think helped it a lot, actually. Because if they copied the book or the David Niven 1956 version, that could have caused problems for it. Because it's a very unique film. You can't do it twice. But yes. Whew. And that's that. So hopefully we will start any moment soon. And let's welcome in. This meeting is being live streamed. And yes, just check on one or two things very quickly. So trying to concentrate on 3 or 4 things at the moment, which is why I'm sounding a bit. So do bear with me, and I do apologise. So, right. Okie dokie. Let's see that everything is all. I need another window. Hang on, no, I don't need another window. Nope. That's relief. So I just need to say, wait for Malcolm. He should be turning up at any moment now. He's certainly aware because he retweeted one of my advertisements for this a few minutes ago, and he did acknowledge the formal invite earlier this evening. Ah, he's here. Okay. Oof. And here we go. Good evening, Malcolm.
Good evening, Paul. Good to see you.
Can you hear me? Oh, it's me. It's me. My volume. I realised the volume was down on my thing. Good evening, Malcolm. Oh! I got it on the. Can you hear me? Oh, it's me. Hang on. Sorry. Oh God, I've been echoing throughout. Oh dear, I should have put the volume down on the YouTube. That is not good. Oh well, never mind. We'll try and improve as we go along. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
Yeah. Yes, it's Around the World in 80 Days.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. Good film.
Yes. Have you seen it before?
No, never.
Never.
No. Not read the book either. So
you haven't read not even the children's Ladybird version?
Nope.
Oh my goodness.
So uncultured.
Oh no. Well, it'll be good on one level because we'll be able to see this through fresh eyes, as it were. Whereas, some of us are perhaps a bit more familiar with it. But overall, what was your view of it?
I enjoyed it very much.
Yes.
It was an interesting beginning.
Yes.
I'm not quite sure why I enjoyed watching the black and white Lumiere's footage. I'm not quite sure why we had to see it, but what it was the story. But It was. I don't think I've ever watched a David Niven film before, so it was very enjoyable watching him.
Not even the Pink Panther.
No, the only Pink Panther I know is Peter Sellers.
I know the first of the Peter Sellers Pink Panther films.
Or maybe I've seen him in that then.
Yeah,
but I'm not really that familiar with him.
yeah.
But yeah, it was. I was a bit annoyed with myself afterwards that it had all these cameo roles. I hardly recognised anyone. In fact, only Frank Sinatra. I was hoping to spot Noel Coward, but no, I didn't.
He did. I think he wore a toupee in that, which a very heavy one, which might have. He was the person who was responsible for sorting out a butler.
Yeah, the job office at the start.
The job, yes.
Yeah. So, but no, it was a really enjoyable film. I caught it on the iPlayer, and I'd forgotten. You mentioned it on Twitter, and I thought, oh crumbs, I've got to watch that.
Yes.
So I drew up iPlayer and noticed it ends today at 6:25, and it's nearly a 3-hour film. I thought, I better start watching that now.
At least you had the time to do it, you know.
Well, I was very fortunate that I did. Yeah. I mean, I would have rented it, whichever streaming service, had I run out of time, or if it was yesterday. But so I finished it at about 6:20 because I watched all the credits, or most of the
credits.
Which
is in itself, you can't, people tend to get up and walk away when the credits come up, and the credits in themselves are very much...
Yeah. I still do that. I've done that with Marvel films in the cinema. It's the thing you shouldn't do.
Yes.
But I enjoyed watching those at the end and explaining where everyone appeared. So yeah, it was very much, pardon me, a film of its time.
Yes.
But no less enjoyable for that, taken on its own terms. So it's very glad to have watched it. Yeah, great recommendation.
It's for those who haven't watched it, I'm just going to explain partly what we're talking about. It's unusual in that it's it brings an all-star cast to extremes, in that literally it's a roll call of the great and good, not just in Hollywood, but in the British film industry, in the French film industry, etc. All in cameo appearances, some with hardly a line of dialogue. But for the benefit, I'm going to mention some of the cast as quickly as possible. And the narrator at the beginning isn't an actor, but he was a prominent American television journalist called Edmund R. Murrow. But then we also had Finlay Curry, Robert Morley, Ronald Squire, Basil Sidney, Noel Coward, as mentioned earlier, Sir John Gielgud, who played Fogg's previous valet, Trevor Howard, Harcourt Williams, Martine Carroll, Charles Boyer, Evelyn Keyes, Cesar Romero, who later played the Joker in the Batman TV series, Alan Mowbray, Sir Cedric Hardwicke. Now, Sir Cedric Hardwicke was a big Hollywood character actor, but to modern audiences, his son Edward Hardwicke would be more well known because he played he was one of the two actors to play Dr. Watson opposite Jeremy Brett's Sherlock Holmes. And we've also got Ronald Colman and Charles Coburn, Peter Lorre, and George Raft, Marlene Dietrich. I think she has only a few lines of dialogue. John Carradine, Frank Sinatra as the saloon pianist, Buster Keaton as the train conductor, Victor McLagan, Jack Oakey, who was in The Great Dictator, Beatrice Leal, John Mills, who played the carriage driver, Glynis Johns, Hermione Gingold. Now, I looked at only two members of, apart from Marion Ross, who was later in the TV series Happy Days, who played who's an extra in this, only two members of the cast are still alive.
Right.
So charge on. One is Glynis Johns, who's nearly 100, who played one of the sporting ladies at the end as Fogg's rushing to get to the Reform Club on time. And the other is Shirley MacLaine, who played Princess Aouda.
Yeah.
And I think this was the film that made her famous, or it's one of her first major roles in a Hollywood film.
Right.
But it also had Robert Newton as Mr. Fix, who was most well known for playing Long John Silver a few years earlier in Hollywood's adaptation of Trevor. And this was his last film.
Right.
He sadly he was a chronic alcoholic, and he died months later from a heart attack at the age of just 51. I know, it's very sad.
Yeah.
But it's an incredible film. And it's also the only film that Mike Todd, the producer, ever produced.
Right.
Which is incredible, really.
Good film.
The one film, and what a film to produce. But he was involved in the film industry, but this was the first time he actually went out and produced a film himself. And he had married, around that time, he also married Elizabeth Taylor. But a year later, he was killed in a plane crash.
Right.
So he never got to make another film.
Oh, okay.
So a bit tragic all around, but I mean, as a one-off, that's incredible. But an interesting thing in film history is the associate producer was an Irishman called Kevin McClory.
Oh.
Now, Kevin McClory later decided to go into producing himself within 2 years. He made an unsuccessful film called The Boy in the Bridge. And then he decided to purchase the rights to the James Bond books. But he didn't like them. He wanted to make a brand new one. And he swapped ideas with Ian Fleming and a scriptwriter called Jack Whittingham. It came to nothing. Ian Fleming then wrote his next Bond novel based on these ideas and called it Thunderball. Kevin McClory got annoyed. There was a legal battle, and Kevin McClory won the rights not just to the novel, but the elements created in the novel, including the character of Ernst Stavro Blofeld, who first appeared, and the organisation Spectre. It meant that he produced the Bond film Thunderball alongside Cubby Broccoli and Harry Saltzman. And when the option came up again to make another one, he made Never Say Never Again with Sean Connery. But he never produced any other films because he felt that by rights he should be producing a series of Bond movies. And he got quite monomaniacal about it, but it caused no end of aggro. And it's only in the last few years that Eon have had the full rights to are allowed to use the character of Blofeld again. That's why there was such a long absence, and why he was brought up and killed off out the blue during the Roger Moore era after, in a pre-title sequence. But he was associate producer of Around the World in 80 Days. So there's a whole series of little film vignettes around this.
Yeah.
What did you particularly enjoy about the film? What was it that particularly struck you?
Well, I think David Niven's performance, most of all. I mean, his character's not really that nice at the start, but he's very amusing. But he gets better.
Yes.
Traveling the world opens his heart up.
Yes.
Until at the end, it's the princess who has to propose a marriage to him, but he says yes. So I think his character and that of the butler, he really makes it, because if it was just Fogg at the start, he would not be a very sympathetic person to follow.
No.
But the butler is a great little character. He really reminds me actually of The Tramp, Charlie Chaplin's Tramp.
Yes, I was thinking that there was something of a silent film caricature about
including if you look at his dress, his slightly baggy trousers.
Yes.
His kind of acrobatic aspect that he has to him. He's obviously a bit poor, because you can see the patches. In his clothes, his coat. So the two of them together are really good. So those two, first and foremost. And I think I have to say, seeing the different locations, I don't know if the film was filmed just in the studio or they went around the world to any degree.
I don't know. I don't think they would have travelled as extensively, but there must have been obviously some location filming.
Yeah, maybe in America, but how they brought the different locations, although there's a fair amount of stereotyping going on, but how they brought the locations to life was quite entertaining. And seeing Mount Fuji in Japan, that was a great sight, I have to say.
Yeah, actually, according to Wikipedia, and a quote from Wikipedia, because I did wonder, I just went to do some quick research to see whether we were wondering a moment ago, and I found it very quickly. And it says here, filming took place in late 1955 from August the 9th to December the 20th. It came out following year in 56. The crew worked fast, 75 days of actual filming. Oh, that is not bad. 2.5 months, when a lot of films take 5-6 months, if that. Producing 680,000 feet of film, which was edited down to 25,734 feet of finished film. The picture cost just under $6 million to make, employing 112 locations in 13 countries and 140 sets. Todd said he and the crew visited every country portrayed in the picture, including England, France, India, East Pakistan, now Bangladesh, Spain, Thailand, and Japan. According to Time Magazine's review of the film, the cast, including extras, totaled 68,894 people. It also featured 7,959 animals, including 4 ostriches, 6 skunks, 15 elephants, 17 fighting bulls, 512 rhesus monkeys, 800 horses, 950 burros, 2,448 American buffalo, 3,800 Rocky Mountain sheep, and a sacred cow that eats flowers on cue. There's also a cat at the Reform Club. The wardrobe department spent $410,000 to provide over 74,000 costumes and 36,092 trinkets. It's basically, it's not all that clear. Clearly, they filmed in a number of countries, but it's clearly an expensive film, but uniquely, they managed to keep on budget,
right?
Which I find incredible, because as a first-time producer and everything like that, he's clearly had his wits about him, which is just incredible, really.
Was he the sole producer?
I believe. Well, Kevin McCloy was the associate producer. Right. Let me again just have a quick look, but it's it also grossed $33 million. He's down under the title producer. He's the only producer. There was Kevin McCloy and William Cameron Menzies as associate producers.
Right.
And it was directed by Michael Anderson. Okay. Who was an English director, who actually, he died fairly recently. He died 4 years ago at the age of 98.
Right.
But he also directed, let's see, The Dam Busters, Yangtze Incident, and whatever favourite film, The Quiller Memorandum, The Shoes of the Fisherman, Logan's Run.
Famous films.
Yes, well, I'm picking out the titles that they're The Jeweler's Shop, 1989. That's yes, but I think Around the World in 80 Days was the biggest film that he did.
Right.
But it's incredible. I think it's the making of it. It's a very unique film in a number of ways, and I think the making of it's just as interesting as the film itself. But certainly,
the logistics were clearly on point. Completely.
Yeah, for many people, it would have, in Mike Todd's place, it would have overwhelmed them. It would have totally overwhelmed them. At some point, they would have been sort of biting their fingernails in a darkened tray office somewhere, not taking calls and thinking if they're bitten off far more than they could chew. But it's incredible film, and as I said at the beginning in my introduction, I do hope people go and see it. But what did you take away? What did you think of the story?
What the idea of traveling around in 80 days?
Yes,
it's a wonderfully simple storyline to have that you can do so much with.
Yes,
and so I mean that's almost the ideal story. It's simple, and it's open to so much variety, depending on how you design the characters, the main characters, and where they go in the world. This film, it could have been a mini series because they get by a lot of countries by going by boat. Well, I suppose he has to complete the mission, the task. But
rather like the recent miniseries with David Tennant.
Yeah, so I discovered that. I hadn't seen that either. But when I was looking for this one, I saw that one crop up. But yeah, it's a very simple storyline, open to great variety. As a writer, it must have been an absolute joy to get your teeth into. Although you would invariably, I imagine, have to do a lot of editing afterwards.
Yes.
I might have wished that they had made Fog, if no one else, a bit more amenable at the start. None of the Reform Club people were particularly endearing. All these upper-class Englishmen and blah, 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 blah. I don't know if the film was trying to subvert the stereotypical English character, or if it fully believed in it. But watching it now it didn't make it hard to watch them, but it would have been nice to have a bit more, well, at least one or two characters a bit more sympathetic that you could enter into the story through. But I mean, we don't spend too much time there, and I guess that's the job, perhaps, of the butler, the rascally butler. Well, he's honest.
I mean, that the butler works. I mean, this is the film version, not the book. But could you imagine if they had John Gielgud's butler decided not to quit, and he finds that Fogg has dropped this on him, and he's like, he would be long suffering and full of perpetual edge of breakdown throughout.
It would have been a very different story, and not necessarily any less funny, because you could approach his frayed nerves in a serious or amusing manner. There's a door behind you.
Yeah, hang on. But yes, that is my wife trying to sneak in as surreptitiously as possible to get something out the study.
I see no one, and it looks like a ghost is opening the door and closing it.
It was a valiant effort on her part.
Oh yeah, I applaud it. It worked. But that's an interesting thought, how a different character would have approached it, although it wouldn't, I think, have changed the story at all. They still go to the particular locations they go to. It's just that what they do when they get there would change. The cameos really added to it. It's funny, you could say, oh, all these cameo appearances, it's pure vanity. It's a vanity trip all round. But all the main talking characters in it, they all gave something to the story. Even when they didn't talk, like Frank Sinatra. Yes. They all gave something. And so I never felt that another Hollywood star turning up again.
Some have tried that in other films. It's never quite worked in the way this has.
You need a good story. It's comparable. It reminds me of how, Star Wars these days gets a lot of criticism for being woke, for being right on with diverse characters, blah, blah, blah. This happened with the sequels.
Yeah.
And some of the characters in there got really panned because some Star Wars fans thought that, they're just there because Disney wants to be really right on and, like I said, diverse characters. But no one said that about Rogue One when that came out.
No.
Even though you had Oriental characters, you had an Asian, Black character, so on and so forth. Reason being, I think, that the story was so good that nobody thought anything of it.
Even Battlestar Galactica.
In the new version.
No, the old version in the 70s. Version. I mean, in the new version, yes.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. So I think where the story, I was going to say, doesn't support it, that's not the right word to use. If the story's bad, people start complaining. They find things to latch onto. And I think that's what happened with the sequels, because the storylines were really, really poor. Whereas with Rogue One, it was incredibly strong as a story. And I think with Around the World, it's a really strong storyline that they've got. Guy has to get around the world in 80 days. What happens? And away he goes. So that was the cameos really played into it well. And of course, you're expecting lots of different people, because he's going from not just one place to another, but one country, one continent. And so that enabled it to work really well. So it was a strength of the film rather than a weakness.
There was one point that's interesting. I mean, in terms of the book, Jules Verne, who wrote it, I mean, it was seen as a fantastic. He dealt with the fantastic and the science fiction.
Yeah.
And so obviously with this, it was seen as a new thing. And so people wondered, could you actually do it? Could you go around the world in 80 days? And one of my favorite stories is a budding female journalist in the 1880s, I think around about a decade later, or nearly a decade later, decided to try it.
Right.
But for another newspaper, another female journalist thought the same. And they sort of went from different sides of the globe and went around. They almost cross-referenced. I think they both beat the record.
Right.
One of them did it in 71 days, I believe. I mean, I would have to look again. It's in Drunk Histories.
Right, okay.
Yeah, it's mentioned in Drunk Histories. If you type Around the World in 80 Days in Drunk Histories, right, you will get on YouTube, you will no doubt find the story.
Right.
So,
well, they did really well, better than Phileas. Oh, and yeah, that was another thing. Phileas with an L. I always thought it was Phineas Fogg.
No, Phileas.
No, Phileas.
But I've never known the name elsewhere.
No, I've never heard it elsewhere either.
No.
Perhaps it's just made up for the part.
Well, some authors do. They're very particular about it, and it's not out of vanity. It's more slightly, from what I know, a slight degree of paranoia. Dickens was forever giving the most unusual surnames for characters, and it was deliberate. And in a lot of cases, it's deliberate because they would. It's the terror some authors have that they will get a letter of complaint about a character, and the letter of complaints from someone with either from the person or someone they know who has the same name.
Yeah, Tolkien got a letter from Dr. Sam Gamgee.
Oh yeah.
Fortunately, he liked the book.
Yeah. Then of course there's the other way around where it's worked 180 degrees the other way, where Ian Fleming purposely picked. He is looking for a name for James Bond, saw in front of him on a book, Birds of the West Indies by James Bond.
Yeah.
Oh, that'll be a name, because he wanted a very ordinary name. But unfortunately, James Bond suffered with this name for the rest of his life, and he lived a lot longer than Ian Fleming did.
Well, I'm sure he didn't mind, though, did he? Because I think he got in touch with.
Yeah, he didn't mind, and he was okay with it. But he was a bit. One of the most fascinating moments of my life was meeting Henry Blofeld, the cricket commentator, and it was partly that, but partly what interested me was Ian Fleming sought him out after saying that he picked the name Blofeld after looking at the club names, and also Henry Blofeld's father was a contemporary, I believe, of Ian Fleming's at Eton.
Right, okay.
So the name of Ernst Stavro Blofeld and the cricketing Henry Blofeld, it's no coincidence.
Yes, I mean, it's a risky move by Fleming, I have to say.
Yeah.
To use real people's names and real individuals' names, not just say to take James from one person and Bond from another, or Ernst and Blofeld.
Yeah.
Because you do rather, I think I've only heard of it happening, someone complaining in modern days. Stephen Fry, I think it happened to him.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure what the outcome of the case was.
It happened to Ian Fleming. Ian Fleming did get a complaint because he named Goldfinger after the Hungarian architect Erno Goldfinger. Goldfinger complained and threatened legal action.
Yeah.
But
risky move.
It was. I get it. I understand. I could be wrong that Fleming didn't like Goldfinger's designs. So,
if he's a modernist, then I fully agree with him.
It was a bit. It was all Art Deco with.
Art Deco's fine.
Well, no, I think it's a bit more modern. I mean, 1937.
Well, brutalism onwards is awful. So
yeah,
we deserve it.
So yeah, you have to be careful with names. But yes, Phileas Fogg is unusual. Even Detective Fix. I mean, I suppose Fix is an ordinary surname, but it's an unusual one.
Fix. I would have thought it's very unusual. Yeah. I have only seen it as a surname, I think, in a book. I'd never heard of a real person. I could see it. Unlike, being as popular as Fogg, but I only know it from one book. I don't know of any real people called Fix.
Yeah. I've just looked up, just to be absolutely sure I got it right, some of Goldfinger's designs. The high-rise flat could be attributed to him, looking at some of them.
It's not a great commendation.
Not a great commendation at all. He was rather minimalist in his... but yes, it's... Yeah, very modernist in the kind of look, but yeah, it's those 1950s and 60s style buildings that looked uber modern at the time and sort of look horribly dated now. I think it was under brutalism.
Hate it, really hate it.
Yeah, I can understand why. I think it's those kind of designs which, when they first came out, they must have looked modern simply because there was nothing like them.
Yeah.
But they don't age well.
Yeah, no.
And I think any design, it's got to age well.
I'm always very happy when I see online that another brutalist building has been pulled down.
Right.
Good. I have fathomless contempt for that art form.
You mentioned the 3 hours in around the 180 days. Did that bother you? Were there times when your attention flagged or you found it?
Surprisingly not. So nowadays, I don't often watch films all in one go in one evening. So for example, over the last month or so, I've been watching the Star Wars films from 1 to 9. And most of them, I think if not all, I've spread over a couple, 3 nights.
Yes.
You sometimes there are particular reasons for that. I just start it too late in the evening. Other times I just want to go and do something else. So if I get distracted, then I'll very quickly say, you know what, call it a day, and I'll carry on tomorrow. With this film, I did have the pressure of watching it on the last day on iPlayer. However, I knew that even while I was watching it, I was open to the possibility of needing to stop or wanting to stop. And I thought I'm quite reconciled to the idea of just renting it on iTunes or whatever, and then carrying on tomorrow sometime. So that never arose, however. Fortunately, I didn't have anything else that I needed to be doing in those hours. So I was able just to sit down, lie down, and then just start watching it. And the film itself, it never flagged. Never flagged in 3 hours. It helped, no doubt, by the fact it's always moving forward. He never dwells, Fogg never dwells in a single place. So it's always moving, always keeping me concentrated on it by that fact. So tightly written, I have to say, really well written, in that there's no padding. There's no padding. Every scene shoves the story on a bit further and a bit further, or moves it on a bit further. So the writer or writers, I definitely applaud them. Thanks to them principally, and of course the actors, director, and everyone else. I was kept engaged right to the very end, without any difficulty at all. How about you?
Same. I mean, it's been a while. I wanted to watch it again, but I was out of time. But I have seen it several times.
Right.
I have always found it entertaining, and I have always found it riveting. The pacing, it's trying to see if there's a famous face that you haven't noticed the previous occasion. And it's very well written. I think it's very well written. It's very well produced. It's very well cast. It's got all the right ingredients. But the interesting thing about this film is if you got any one of those ingredients wrong, it would have, exactly. Which means it's high risk in making it. I don't think actually when it came to dwelling on it, Mike Todd was taking a very big risk with this, not just financially, not just as a first-time producer, but on a number of levels. He took a very big risk, and it paid off. And thankfully, he lived to see it pay off. Unfortunately, he didn't live to start work on any other projects. But it's
the story, the script is not by any means flawless. I think Fix could have been handled a bit better. He's trying to bust Fogg early on, but they end up in America. He doesn't catch him until England. And then that whole who the real robber of the Bank of England is just 1 minute it's Fogg, the next minute, oh, awfully sorry, old chap, we've made a terrible mistake. You don't even find out who it actually is.
In modern versions, they put the stakes up a bit higher,
right?
Which I think which isn't this is pretty faithful to the book in a number of ways, and I think and I agree with that actually. Although I don't like as a rule, I don't like films deviating from books too far. I appreciate a little bit of deviation has to happen, but I don't like it to go too far.
Deviation.
This is one of those occasions where I think if you make future editions of this in any way, you've got to deviate to a certain extent. Because I don't think that works as quite well as it should. I think the stakes should be a little bit higher. But it's a question of how to do that.
Where possible, it really ought to be true to the spirit of the novel. If one's going to adapt a novel, it should be true to the novel spirit, and not going in a direction that the original author didn't intend. But that's a big field of discussion.
Yeah, closest adaptation to a book I've ever seen, and it was literally that close, the book and the film, was Where Eagles Dare. And I'd read the book first. And I was literally watching what I'd been reading on the page. And I was impressed. And then I found out Alistair MacLean was writing a novel whilst his screenplay was being filmed.
Right.
So there was this.
Well, the TV version of Brideshead Revisited is very much the same.
Yeah.
It's lifted. They wrote the script originally, and I think it was Colin Dexter, Inspector Morse, who wrote it. But they didn't like it, whoever wrote it, and they started again and basically just took War's novel and put that on the screen, just as it should be. And it's absolutely perfect as it is. It's a perfect novel. I imagine it's quite rare that books translate to films as closely as that, or TV even, and probably undesirable that they should do all the time.
Especially if passage of
history. What's the point of the adaptation? It's not an adaptation, it's a transferal. It's been done already, why do it again? But if there really is the spirit of the author, that's enough for me.
Yeah, especially if times and cultures have changed. I mean,
I imagine the new version of Around the World would be a little different in, let's say, the Cowboys and Indians.
They did go through the. I don't want to give the game away for the TV version. Obviously, they go through the Wild West, but it's something very different.
Yeah, I could imagine.
Something very, very different, but very well done.
At the very least, I imagine they would have nowadays an Indian actress, not a white woman.
This is the thing. I don't want to give away spoilers. It is very well cast. It is very respectful of various ethnicities, but it's very different. And to explain it would be giving some explain it in a new way would be giving some significant spoilers because it's very tightly so. But I know some didn't, but I personally liked it. Because I recognized that with that story you did need to do a major deviation from the book. It's not that there's anything wrong with the book. It's not that the book's unfilmable. It's shown it is filmable. It's just it is such a unique story. You would be replicating a 1956 film onto television. You can't get away with that. So you have to do something else while staying true to the foundations of the original.
Yeah, and I think that's enough. That film belongs in its time.
Yeah, it's almost like
put it into 20 whatever.
Yeah, it's like when Eon adapts the James Bond novels. I've heard Kelvin Dyson did a very good video on this about because in response to the talk some have about why don't we go straight back to the Ian Fleming books, but set Bond in the 1950s, copy it from the, transfer. And Kelvin Dyson's like, you don't really want to do that.
Yeah.
They're a bit more brutal. Fleming did have elements of racism. You don't really,
racism, sexism.
Sexism, misogyny.
Yeah,
I mean, Fleming lived Bond's lifestyle, and he died from heart disease at 56.
Yeah, it'd be pointless. You've got the books if you want that. I mean, I suppose you could put them in the film in the 50s, but it would be no point just reproducing the book. It would have to be, same story but told in a different way in the 50s. I mean, what would be the point?
Yeah.
Maybe now that he's on Amazon or owned by Amazon, they might try something like that. And I'd probably watch it. But really, I'm happy for him. One of the unexpectedly great things about the film series is how it's managed to evolve along with the times in which it's appeared. The British monarchy and James Bond have done such a good job of evolving over the years.
The Queen started at the same time, actually.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, in the mid-50s, late 50s.
Well, Queen came to the throne in 1952. Casino Royale, the first 52? One, appeared in 53.
Yeah, even earlier. But yeah, it's who would have thought it that the film series would be so capable of constantly renewing itself. And I think the reason for that is simple storyline. British agent goes in search of and completes the mission. Just like Around the World in 80 Days, it's such a simple premise that there it is, and now you can you're only held back by your imagination.
Yeah.
Whereas, sorry, there are other big spy series that could never last 50 years. Jason Bourne exhausted after 3 films. Reason being, his wasn't a simple premise, but he had the specific issue of his memory. Yeah. And once he got his memory back, there was really no point. And I think that's why the 4th film, excluding Bourne Legacy, was a failure. But Bond doesn't have any of that. He's simply a spy who does these missions, and they can adapt the way in which he does them according to the norms of the age.
So I take it let me put it this way. 10 being the highest, 1 being the lowest, how would you rate Around the World in 80 Days?
I'd definitely give it an easy 8. On the borders of 9 perhaps, but I think a good 8. It was some great characters, Fogg and the butler especially. Passepartout. Kept thinking of passport.
It's spelled like passport, but it is Passepartout.
Passepartout. They're so in different ways very engaging, and they play off each other really well. They meet such a collection of interesting, fascinating, silly, marvelous people along the way, and there is character development for Fogg as well. And it's such a diverse range of places, people that he visits, that you wonder, well, you're carried along by it. Maybe you do wonder what next. Otherwise, like me, you're just carried along, enjoying this place, then the next one, then the next one, seeing what's going to happen next. Definitely easy 8. 9 and 10 would have to be really, really special. But I could see myself on a different day being a bit more generous, but I think go for 8 for now.
Okay. Yeah. Well, thank you for your time this evening, Malcolm, and thank you for.
What would you rate it?
That is a good question. It's been a while. As things stand, I'd give it a 9. But I do think it's a very unique film. It's not one of the best films in the history of cinema, but I think it's got an important place in the history of cinema because of the cast list, because of the the whole premise working, because it was the only film Mike Todd produced. It's I think on several levels it's an important cinematic film. Sure. I wouldn't rate it as much as some of the big major classics in film history, but it's certainly among if it's not among the royalty, it's certainly among the aristocracy of the films.
That's a great way of putting it. I like that. Yeah.
But it's yes, so that's good. Are there any films you want us to do next time?
Well, you mentioned Calvin Dyson.
Yes.
I just started watching his mega review of it's almost as long as
it is. I know what you're going to say because I watched it and I intended to. This echoes what you said Around the World in the 80 Days. I thought I took one look and I was like, like that. And I told myself I would watch Kelvin's YouTube video episodically.
That's pretty much what I do with anything of any.
I had it on in the background whilst I was cooking dinner for Rachel and myself.
Yeah.
I was watching it whilst eating dinner because Rachel, I think, was busy with something else whilst having dinner. And I was watching it cleaning up. And I was like, oh, just this bit, just this bit, just this bit. And by the time it was 2 hours in, it's like, well, I've got another 16 minutes to go. I might as well watch it now. I like the bit at the end where I love some of the little bits Kelvin does in his films, like the sense of humor and the
little skits, or the skits are wonderful.
The skits I love. Yeah. He should be. I think he is a. He ought to be doing a comedy show in his
for sure.
But I loved a little bit where he set 2 glasses of whiskey just there and poured. I thought that was good because you felt like we'd all gone on this journey with Kelvin, and if any of us had been with him, having this intense 2-hour discussion, you knew that point. It's like you get the alcohol out and sum up. So he's a very. I mean, he made a film, I believe, a few years ago. He as part of his university thing. He's very good at that kind of how to do a narrative, how to present things, etc. Far more better than my shoddy amateurism. And
well, I mean, I wouldn't be any better.
Yeah, he clearly fought it very through. So yes, I know what you're going to say. So I imagine No Time to Die is to be.
Well, I was going to say, being very cheesy, that we should watch his review video.
Review Kelvin's review.
But I think no, let's not do that. The film would probably. I'm not sure he would want us to review his review.
I think he would be slightly freaked out by that. Actually,
it would be.
I know I would be. I know.
But I wish him. I don't know if he watches these, but if he did, him and David Savitsky, I wish they would do a podcast
of the Bond experience. Well, they do. They review Bond films together.
Yeah, but on YouTube. Yeah. But like to put it on Apple or whatever. Yeah. To just listen to, they would be wonderful at that.
Yeah.
But that's by the by. No Time to Die is a wonderful choice. Now that you've mentioned it, Paul.
Have we done it?
We reviewed the film. Yeah, to be fair.
I'm just trying to think whether we did. We must have done.
I'm sure we did in late October or.
Let me double check.
Right, but otherwise, well,
I've got 1 or 2 ideas if you're stuck on them, but let's have a quick look because. On the delay. Yeah, we did. October the 11th.
Oh, it was early then. Yeah.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, so fair enough. Shouldn't do it again.
Live stream spoiler discussion of No Time to Die.
Yeah.
So we're doing No Time to Die again.
No. Let's do something else.
Let's do something. Yeah, I agree. I was like, how would you feel about doing it? It's on BBC iPlayer for over a year. There's plenty. You're not going to be against the clock with this one.
Right.
How would you feel about doing a review of Amundsen? There's a biopic on Roald Amundsen.
Okay. Yep. Is he the guy that beat Scott to the Antarctic?
Yes.
Right. Okay.
And also, he was the first to cross the Northwest Passage successfully. He was the second to cross the Northeast Passage. He was also the first to reach the North Pole. He was the first to cross the Arctic Ocean, albeit by airship. He was the first person to be at both North and South Pole, because obviously they flew over the North Pole. But given Peary, the shakiness about Peary's expedition, and given the shakiness about Richard Best, he may have been the first to be at both poles. He may have been among the first at the North Pole as well as among the first at the South.
Sure.
But he's a lot of an incredible explorer. but and the film is fairly true to life as well.
Okay.
So yeah,
right. Let's go for that then.
Let's go for Amundsen.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Okay, and we'll arrange the finer details along the way.
Okay.
All right. Well, have a good evening, Malcolm.
You too.
And I hope you have a relaxing 3 hours or whatever's left in.
Thank you. And regards to Mrs. Bergin.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Well, speak to you soon.
Yep. Cheers.